China. Let's jump into it. So, China was starting to have some internal problems with itself, as seen by the Taiping Rebellion. Basically, a lot of people in China were kind of wanting some reform, some things to change. They basically wanted more equality in a sense, more land distribution. They wanted people to be more seen as equal. And so, through some charismatic leaders, different random people, different groups were militias were formed and such, and rebelled against the government. And this is one of the worst times during this century for human loss, with about 20 to 30 million people estimated who died at this time, who were killed. And so China was having this struggle with themselves, and they were able to kind of put down the Taiping Rebellion. But also at the same time, roughly, China had always it was having difficulty with England because England wanted to trade with China, but China had always seen themselves as the Middle Kingdom and people who didn't really want to be open to England with all the trade and stuff. This is even seen by Emperor Long's reply to King George III's request for more trade. So England was they owned India, so pretty much, so they kind of farmed up some opium there and ended up smuggling it illegally over that India, China, Nepal kind of border area for the most part, and they brought in illegal opium from India into China, and China didn't like this. It didn't follow their rules. They didn't like that it was being smuggled in. It was all illegal. But at the same time, England felt that when the opium was in China, it was their property. So if China was trying to destroy it, they didn't like that. China obviously wanted it gone, so they ended up declaring war against England. Was known as the Opium Wars, and England won very quickly and easily. This is because China was behind in industrialization and modernization. They kind of started to realize it through the Opium Wars. And the Opium Wars ended, of course, with England being very victorious, and the Treaty of Nanjing ended this war officially, and England, as well as a lot of other Western countries and stuff, really benefited from this war, whereas China was not so much in the benefit for this. They had more ports that were accessible to them legally and everything. So China was kind of forced to have more trade through this, and this is even seen through the later Opium Wars that came soon after, where China was just put down again, completely wrecked, if you will, by England and Western powers. Okay, so then we get into what was known as the Boxer Rebellion, which was a couple of different militias at that time, which kind of rose against and tried to kill some of the foreigners, and they really tried to kill what they called the foreign devils and everything. So they kind of went down to Beijing, and they were wanting to, they tried to expel the foreign people, essentially, because they were very traditional in a sense. They wanted to keep things the same, keep the trade reduced. However, when they got there, Western powers and Japan and all of those people who were taking control over China in the economic sense easily put down the Boxer Rebellion, and this was yet another time that China realized how dependent they were becoming of Western powers. It's also important to note that about the time of the Boxer Rebellion, the United States in 1899 proposed an open door policy with China, which basically stated that all foreign countries had access to those ports. The U.S. feared that they were losing access to that, and that it was mostly the Western powers that were gaining access to those ports, and they feared that their trade with China would be reduced, so they proposed this open door policy. That's part of the reason that the Boxer Rebellion did occur in some ways. They were starting to realize that there were possibly a lot of foreign people coming into China, and they, of course, didn't like that, so they rebelled. Now, we kind of ask ourselves the question if whether or not this was beneficial for China. Now, at first glance, you think that all this was not good for China. I mean, a lot of people died through their internal struggles and their struggles with the Western powers. Well, when you think about it really, this trade could be beneficial for China in the long run, as well as that if China had not been exposed to the Western pressures that they felt and the pressure to be trading with the Western powers, if they weren't exposed to that at this time and were rather exposed to it, say now, the destruction of China could have been a lot worse. This is because at this time, China began kind of creating some self-strengthening reforms, as they were called, self-strengthening policies. And this kind of helped China become a little bit more industrialized, a little bit more modernized, but it didn't really help that much in the long run, which is why they still kept kind of losing to the Western powers. Now, if you were to, again, going to compare this to now, well, the European powers, they might have nuclear warfare and stuff by now, but China, if they hadn't installed these reforms and tried to become more powerful compared to the Western powers, then they could have easily, like, completely been blown sky high in nuclear warfare. So in that sense, this was kind of beneficial to China. It was very eye-opening and kind of helped them in the long run. But why? Why did all of this exactly happen to China? Why was Europe able to basically take control of China in some ways? Well, it really comes down to England and everybody in Western Europe being able to be more industrialized sooner. They industrialized faster. They were the ones who had that happen to. It also comes down to England being imperialistic in India and using India as a source for opium and a border trade with China, beginning that whole little opium war thing that they had going on. So there you have it. Overall, it all kind of came down to the Western powers being able to industrialize first and their need that they felt to control the trade with China and be able to trade with other powers in order to gain their power.